Hey, stop. I need your ID right now.
I've told you twice, I'm late for court.
I don't care. You don't move without answering me.
On what legal basis are you detaining me?
You don't need one. Just do what you're told.
And you can explain that to the chief judge if that's who you're stopping.
Two ICE agents thought they were executing a workplace enforcement action at the federal courthouse in downtown Phoenix. They had received a tip about an undocumented cleaning worker. They had their badges, their authority, and the confidence that comes from operating in federal buildings without oversight. But when they continued demanding identification from Judge Dr. Imani Caldwell, despite her repeated explanations that she was a federal judge on her way to chambers, and when Agent Marcus Duval raised his voice to stop her from entering the elevator at 8:43 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, they triggered a chain of events that would end with both agents fired, a $6.8 million settlement, and the first federal prosecution of ICE agents for civil rights violations in Arizona history. Caldwell wasn't just any employee. She was a United States District Court judge, appointed at 41, former federal prosecutor who had tried 87 cases with an 84% conviction rate, Yale Law graduate, and the daughter of a Birmingham civil rights attorney who had marched with Dr. King. Her father had defended freedom riders in Alabama courts. She had chambers on the 9th floor of the building where these agents had been questioning her. "I already told you I'm Judge Caldwell," she had said. They demanded ID anyway. She asked for legal basis. They raised their voices. The lobby security cameras captured everything. Within 90 minutes, the chief judge of the District of Arizona, the U.S. Marshal Service, the Department of Justice, and Homeland Security's Office of Inspector General all knew what had happened in that elevator lobby. The settlement would be unprecedented, but the real cost wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in careers destroyed, an agency humiliated, and a lesson about jurisdiction learned the hard way. Some judges you don't detain in their own courthouse. The Sandra Day O'Connor United States Courthouse sits in downtown Phoenix like a monument to federal authority. 10 stories of granite and glass, home to 12 district court judges, 3 magistrate judges, the entire federal judicial apparatus for Arizona. Security is tight, federal protective service at every entrance, metal detectors, x-ray machines, credentialed access only. Judge Imani Caldwell had worked in this building for 6 years, first as an assistant U.S. attorney on the 5th floor, then as a district judge with chambers on the 9th. She knew every security guard by name, every marshal, every clerk. Wednesday morning, 8:43 a.m., Caldwell walked through the employee entrance on the building's west side. She badged in using her judicial credentials. The security scanner registered her entry, Judge I. Caldwell, Chambers 907. Access granted. She was wearing her robes, black judicial robes with a traditional design. Underneath, a white blouse and gray slacks. Her leather briefcase contained files for this morning's sentencing hearing. A meth trafficking case. Defendant facing 15 years. The elevator lobby on the ground floor served all judicial chambers. Marble floors, high ceilings. The seal of the United States District Court mounted on the wall. A space that declared federal authority with every architectural detail. 2 men had approached Caldwell as she headed toward the elevator banks. ICE insignia on their tactical vests, agent credentials hanging from lanyards. They'd been waiting, watching employees enter, looking for someone. The conversation had already been going for nearly a minute. Caldwell had explained who she was, where she worked. They hadn't accepted it. Caldwell pressed the call button for the judicial elevator. Restricted access, judges, marshals, and authorized personnel only. The taller agent, Marcus Duval, according to the name on his vest, stood between her and the elevator. His partner, Benjamin Reeves, had positioned himself to block the exit. "Ma'am, I need to see identification, right now." "Agent, I already told you I'm Judge Caldwell. I have a hearing in 20 minutes. That's not what I asked." "ID." Now, Caldwell's legal mind had already processed this situation. ICE agents in a federal courthouse, refusing to accept her identification, demanding documentation from someone in judicial robes who had already explained her position twice. "On what legal basis are you detaining me?" "I'm asking for identification." "Then you can speak to court security." "I'm going to my chambers." "Hey, stop right there." The words hung in the marble lobby. Above them, security cameras recorded every word, every movement, every violation of protocol that was about to escalate beyond Duval's comprehension. Caldwell turned slowly. 23 years in the legal system had taught her to recognize bias dressed up as procedure. She'd seen it in courtrooms, in depositions, in every instance where law enforcement substituted actual evidence with assumptions based on appearance. "I've identified myself twice. I'm wearing judicial robes. I badged through security. I'm going to my chambers. If you have questions about my status, contact the Marshal Service. We're conducting immigration enforcement. We need to verify everyone in the building. Everyone? Caldwell looked at him, really looked at him. Or just the black woman heading to the elevator? The elevator arrived. The doors opened. Caldwell stepped toward it. Duvall moved to block her. Ma'am, you're not getting on that elevator until we verify your status. My status as a federal judge? I just verified it. Judge Caldwell, Chambers 907. The security system logged my entry 3 minutes ago. Anyone can put on a robe. The statement hung in the marble lobby. Above them, security cameras recorded every word, every movement, every assumption that was about to destroy 2 careers. Anyone can put on a robe, but not everyone can badge through federal security. Not everyone has their photograph in the courthouse directory. Not everyone has their name on a chamber door upstairs. Not everyone is a sitting federal judge. We need to verify, then verify. Call the Marshal Service. Call courthouse security. Call the Chief Judge's office. But you don't detain a federal judge because she's black and you can't imagine a black woman being a judge. Reeves shifted uncomfortably. His hand moved to his radio, then stopped. His partner's certainty was absolute, and he'd learned not to question it. Turn around. Hands behind your back. Caldwell didn't move, didn't comply. Stood in her judicial robes in the lobby of her own courthouse and watched 2 federal agents commit career suicide. You're attempting to detain a federal judge in a federal courthouse without probable cause, without jurisdiction, while security cameras record every second. I suggest you reconsider. Duvall reached for zip ties on his belt. The elevator doors began to close. Caldwell made no move to stop them, made no move to flee, simply stood her ground while Duvall and Reeves demonstrated exactly what happens when assumption overrides training. Marshal! Caldwell's voice carried across the lobby, clear, authoritative, the voice she used in her courtroom when order needed to be restored. A U.S. Marshal emerged from the security office. Deputy Marshal Terrence Boyle, 12-year veteran, had escorted judges in this building since it opened. He recognized Caldwell instantly, recognized the situation even faster. Judge Caldwell? What's going on? These ICE agents are attempting to detain me. They claim I matched the description of an undocumented worker. Boyle's hand moved to his radio. His other hand rested on his service weapon. Not threatening, just present. Gentlemen, that's Judge Imani Caldwell, United States District Court. You're in her courthouse. I suggest you step back. We're conducting immigration enforcement. We have authority. Not here. You don't. This is a federal courthouse. The Marshal Service has exclusive law enforcement jurisdiction. ICE has no authority to conduct enforcement actions in this building without prior authorization from the Chief Judge. Duvall's confidence flickered. We received a tip. About who? Boyle's tone had shifted. No longer polite, now official. A federal law enforcement officer addressing civilians who had overstepped about someone working in this building. She matches the description. She's a federal judge. She's wearing judicial robes. She badged through security. Her chambers are upstairs. What exactly makes you think she's your target? The question demanded an answer. Duvall had none that wouldn't expose exactly what Caldwell already knew. That he'd seen a black woman in a courthouse and assumed she couldn't be a judge. That his description was so vague it justified stopping anyone who fit his preconceptions. That he'd confused jurisdiction with authority and assumption with evidence. She was near the elevators. We're checking everyone. You're checking a federal judge in her workplace, during business hours, while she's on her way to conduct a sentencing hearing. Boyle keyed his radio. Security, this is Boyle. I need supervisor to the west elevator lobby immediately. We have an incident involving ICE agents and Judge Caldwell. The radio crackled acknowledgement. More courthouse employees had emerged. Clerks heading to their offices, attorneys arriving for hearings, a building full of people who worked with Caldwell daily, who knew exactly who she was. Imani, a voice from across the lobby. Adrian Lawson, another district judge, had just entered through security. She took in the scene instantly. 2 ICE agents. Caldwell blocked from the elevator. A marshal with his hand on his radio. What the hell is this? These agents are detaining Judge Caldwell. They think she's undocumented. Lawson's expression went from confusion to fury in 2 seconds. She's a federal judge. She's been on the bench for 6 years. Imani and I were in the same confirmation hearing. They say she matches a description, Boyle said. Female, African American, working in the building. Lawson turned to Duvall. That's not a description. That's racial profiling. You saw a black woman in a courthouse and assumed she couldn't possibly be a judge. Ma'am, we're just doing our jobs. Your job doesn't include detaining federal judges in their own courthouse. Your job doesn't include operating in a federal building without proper authorization. And your job definitely doesn't include assuming that black women can't be judges. The lobby was filling. Word had spread through the courthouse with the speed that only government buildings achieve. Something happening in the West Lobby. ICE agents confronting Judge Caldwell. People emerging from offices, from courtrooms, from chambers. The security supervisor arrived, then the lead marshal for the building, then the chief judge's clerk, phone already to her ear. Judge Caldwell. The security supervisor, a former Secret Service agent named Vincent DeMarco, addressed her formally. Are you all right? I'm fine, Vincent. These agents seem to think I'm their enforcement target. DeMarco turned to Duvall and Reeves. Your names and badge numbers. Now, we're federal agents. We don't answer to, you're in a federal courthouse. I'm the chief security officer for this building. You answer to me or you answer to the U.S. Marshals. Your choice. Duvall's hand moved toward his badge. Slowly, the crowd of courthouse employees watching made resistance pointless. Agent Marcus Duvall, ICE, badge 4,729. Agent Benjamin Reeves, badge 4,831. DeMarco wrote it down. What's your authorization for being in this building? We're conducting immigration enforcement. Do you have a warrant? We don't need a warrant for immigration enforcement. You do in a federal courthouse. This building operates under special jurisdiction. ICE cannot conduct enforcement operations here without explicit authorization from the chief judge and coordination with the Marshal Service. Who authorized your presence? Duvall's silence was answer enough. So you entered a federal courthouse without authorization to conduct enforcement actions in a building where you have no jurisdiction, and when you saw a black woman in judicial robes with obvious authorized access, you decided to detain her because she matches your description of female and black. DeMarco let the words sit. That's not just a jurisdictional violation. That's a civil rights violation. That's racial profiling. And you did it to a federal judge in her workplace, on camera. He gestured to the security cameras mounted throughout the lobby. Every angle covered, every word recorded, every moment documented. Judge Caldwell, I'm securing these agents' credentials until the chief judge determines appropriate action. With your permission. Permission granted. DeMarco extended his hand. Gentlemen, your ICE credentials, you'll get them back when the chief judge authorizes it. You can't confiscate federal credentials. I'm not confiscating. I'm securing evidence in a potential civil rights violation. You can surrender them voluntarily, or the marshals can detain you and collect them as part of an investigation. Your choice. Reeves handed over his credentials immediately. Duvall held out for 10 seconds before complying. Both of you will wait in the security office until the chief judge is available. You will not leave this building. You will not contact your supervisors. You will not delete any communications. The marshals will escort you. 2 marshals moved to flank the agents. Not aggressive, just present. The kind of presence that makes clear compliance isn't optional. The crowd in the lobby watched in silence as Duvall and Reeves were led away. Watched 2 federal agents get treated like suspects in the very building they thought gave them authority. Caldwell finally pressed the elevator call button again. The doors opened immediately. Imani, you okay? Lawson had moved to her side. I'm fine. I have a sentencing at 9. I need to review the pre-sentence report. You're going to proceed with the hearing? Why wouldn't I? 2 ICE agents having a jurisdictional misunderstanding doesn't change the fact that I have a defendant waiting for sentencing. The elevator doors closed. Caldwell rode to the 9th floor, walked to her chambers, greeted her clerk, who had already heard about the incident through the courthouse grapevine. Your 9 o'clock is ready. Defendant is in the courtroom. Good. Let's proceed. The sentencing hearing lasted 40 minutes. Caldwell reviewed the defendant's criminal history, the nature of the offense, the impact on victims. She sentenced him to 12 years, 3 less than the guidelines recommended, based on his cooperation and his family's circumstances. She never mentioned the lobby, never referenced the ICE agents, conducted the hearing with the same professionalism she brought to every case. When she returned to chambers at 10:15, her clerk handed her a note. The chief judge wants to see you immediately. Chief Judge Sylvia Hartman's chambers occupied the corner suite on the 10th floor, panoramic views of Phoenix, mahogany desk that had served 4 chief judges, photographs with 3 presidents on the wall. Hartman was on the phone when Caldwell entered. She gestured to a chair, continued her conversation. Yes, Director, I understand. No, I don't care about your tip. Your agents had no authorization. Because this is a federal courthouse, not a shopping mall. That's correct. Detained. Until I decide otherwise, I'll call you back. She hung up, looked at Caldwell. The ICE field director for Arizona is very upset that I'm holding his agents. Are they still in the building? Security office. Under marshal supervision, I've requested their communications, their tip documentation, and their operational authorization. So far, they've produced nothing except an anonymous phone call. Of course they have. Imani, I need to know. Are you all right? Really all right? Caldwell considered the question. I'm angry. I'm insulted, but I'm not surprised. You know how many times I've been mistaken for a court reporter, for an interpreter, for a defendant? Hartman nodded. She'd been a judge for 19 years. She'd seen the assumptions, the biases, the casual racism that assumed people of color couldn't hold positions of authority. What do you want to happen? I want a full investigation. DOJ Civil Rights Division, IG investigation of those agents, pattern review of their enforcement actions, and I want every ICE agent in Arizona to understand that they don't have jurisdiction in federal courthouses without explicit authorization. You'll have it. I've already called the U.S. Attorney. The IG is sending investigators this afternoon, and I'm issuing a standing order. No ICE enforcement in this courthouse without my written permission and marshal coordination. Good. There will be media coverage. This is going to be public. It should be public. Federal agents racially profiling a federal judge in her own courthouse. That's newsworthy. You'll be asked to comment. I'll decline. The investigation will speak for itself. The investigation revealed exactly what Caldwell had suspected. Marcus Duvall and Benjamin Reeves had been partners for 3 years. They had conducted 127 workplace enforcement operations in that time. 89 had been at locations where the anonymous tip described someone as African American or appearing to be from Africa or the Caribbean. 73 of those 127 operations had resulted in 0 arrests. No undocumented workers found, no immigration violations discovered, just wasted resources and terrified employees. The 54 arrests they had made were being reviewed, every single one. Defense attorneys were filing motions, questioning probable cause, questioning the validity of arrests made by agents whose patterns suggested racial profiling. The anonymous tip about the courthouse came from a phone number traced to a disposable cell purchased in Mesa. The tip claimed an undocumented cleaning worker named Tanisha was working in the federal courthouse. No last name, no specific location, no identifying details beyond African American female and cleaning worker. There were 9 women named Tanisha working in the courthouse. All were black. All were documented U.S. citizens. Several had worked in the building longer than Duvall had been an ICE agent. 3 had family members who had worked in federal service for generations. The tip was either fabricated or so vague it justified nothing. Duvall and Reeves's text messages painted the operational picture. Got a tip at the courthouse, probably another diversity hire situation. These judges always want to look progressive. Let's check the elevators, catch them coming in. The messages continued. If we get her during work hours, the judge can't complain. Federal building, federal jurisdiction, we're covered. They weren't covered. They had fundamentally misunderstood courthouse jurisdiction. Federal buildings aren't open season for any federal agency. Each building operates under specific jurisdiction. Courthouses answer to the federal judiciary. ICE had no more authority to conduct enforcement operations there than the FBI could conduct raids at CIA headquarters. The protocols existed in written policy. ICE agents were required to coordinate with the Marshal Service before entering federal courthouses, required to obtain authorization from chief judges, required to provide specific, credible information justifying their presence. Duvall and Reeves had ignored all of it. Their supervisory agent, Gregory Stokes, had approved the operation via text. Do it. These judges need to learn we're not asking permission. Stokes was suspended within 48 hours. The Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General found that Duvall had conducted 34 enforcement operations in the previous year that violated coordination protocols. Schools, churches, courthouses, medical facilities, places where ICE was required to exercise restraint and obtain approval. His stop records showed a pattern. 78% of his workplace enforcement actions targeted locations with predominantly black workforces. 0 had resulted in actual immigration violations involving black employees. The targets were always described vaguely, always matched broad demographics, never matched actual immigration violations. Duvall had operated with the assumption that his badge granted unlimited authority. That federal agent meant federal access, that he could go anywhere, question anyone, detain anyone who fit his description. Reeves had participated in most of these operations. He had expressed doubt in several text messages, questioned whether they had authorization, been told by Duvall to stop overthinking it. His cooperation with investigators was immediate. His testimony would be essential. His career was still finished. The federal grand jury convened 8 weeks later. Duvall was indicted on deprivation of rights under color of law, exceeding authorized jurisdiction, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. Reeves received lesser charges in exchange for cooperation. Supervisory Agent Stokes faced additional charges for authorizing operations he knew violated protocol. Caldwell testified for 2 hours. She didn't need notes. 23 years in the legal system had prepared her perfectly. Agent Duvall saw a black woman in judicial robes with courthouse credentials, badged through security, standing in the elevator lobby of a federal courthouse, and he decided that she matched his description of an undocumented cleaning worker. The only thing I matched was his assumption that black women in courthouses must be support staff, not judges, that we couldn't possibly hold positions of authority. The grand jury returned indictments on all counts. The federal trial in Phoenix drew national attention. ICE agents who detained a federal judge, racial profiling in a courthouse. The security footage played on every news channel. Duvall's defense argued mistake, overzealous enforcement, misunderstanding of jurisdiction. The prosecutor's response was surgical. This wasn't a mistake. Agent Duvall conducted 34 unauthorized operations, targeted workplaces with black employees, ignored protocols designed to prevent exactly this situation. When confronted by a federal judge, a black woman who explained his jurisdictional error and identified herself twice, he didn't believe her. He escalated. He attempted to detain her because she challenged his authority while being black. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts for Duvall, guilty on reduced charges for Reeves, guilty for Stokes. Duvall showed no reaction. Reeves stared at his hands. Stokes' jaw tightened, but he remained silent. The judge scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks later. Agent Duvall, you wore a federal badge. You had federal authority. You used both to harass employees, ignore jurisdictional limits, and racially profile anyone who matched your assumptions that black people must be immigrants, must be service workers, couldn't possibly be federal judges. The sentencing judge reviewed materials with an expression that suggested she'd seen enough. When confronted by a federal judge in her own courthouse, a black woman in judicial robes, you didn't recognize your error. You escalated. You attempted to detain her because the idea of a black federal judge didn't fit your worldview. Duvall's sentence: 4 years federal prison, enhanced for abuse of authority and pattern of conduct. Reeves received 14 months. Cooperation had reduced his exposure significantly. Stokes received 30 months for authorizing operations he knew violated policy. All three were led from the courtroom in handcuffs. Their careers in federal law enforcement over. Their pensions forfeited. Their names added to databases as cautionary examples. The civil settlement followed within 4 months. Judge Imani Caldwell versus U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Marcus Duvall, Benjamin Reeves, Gregory Stokes. ICE agreed to pay $6.8 million rather than face a trial exposing systematic failures across their Arizona operations, the largest settlement in federal courthouse history. Caldwell directed the distribution: $2 million to immigrant rights organizations, $1 million to legal aid for immigration cases, $1 million to judicial diversity programs. The remainder established the Augustus Caldwell Jr. Civil Rights Legal Defense Fund, named for her father. For a Birmingham attorney who believed constitutional rights belonged to everyone, who proved it in courtrooms for 47 years. Full representation for civil rights cases, voting rights, housing discrimination, police misconduct, employment discrimination, educational access. Any case where someone's constitutional rights were violated, no fee requirement, no income limits, just a commitment to justice. The same commitment her father had lived. ICE entered a consent decree requiring written authorization for all courthouse operations, mandatory coordination with U.S. Marshals, specific probable cause documentation, and civilian oversight of workplace enforcement. The policies Duvall had ignored were now federally mandated. Caldwell returned to her chambers the day after the lobby incident, presided over hearings, managed her docket, sentenced defendants, ruled on motions. She never took a day off. Never let the incident interfere with her work. But she did change one thing. Every new attorney who appeared before her got the same introduction. Welcome to my courtroom. I'm Judge Caldwell. I've been a federal judge for 6 years. Before that, I was a federal prosecutor for 11 years, I handle my docket professionally, and I expect the same from counsel. And then, more quietly, I'm also the daughter and granddaughter of civil rights attorneys. My grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman who came home and couldn't vote. My father defended freedom riders in Birmingham. Augustus Caldwell Jr., maybe you've heard of him. They taught me that in America, constitutional rights have to be defended, constantly, in every courtroom. That's what I expect us to honor here, the law, not assumptions about who belongs in this building. Some attorneys understood immediately. Others learned as they watched Caldwell work, precise, fair, uncompromising on constitutional rights. Her parents had attended her investiture as a federal judge, sat in the front row while she took the oath, cried when she put on her robes for the first time, watched their daughter become the third generation in their family to fight for civil rights through the legal system. Her grandfather, Augustus Caldwell Sr., had been a Tuskegee Airman, flew 68 combat missions over Europe, came home to Alabama and couldn't vote, couldn't sit at lunch counters, couldn't use public facilities marked whites only, spent the rest of his life fighting the segregation he'd risked his life to defeat. Her father, Augustus Caldwell Jr., became a civil rights attorney in Birmingham, defended freedom riders arrested at bus stations in 1961, represented students who sat in at segregated lunch counters, marched from Selma to Montgomery in 1965, got arrested 17 times for defending people's constitutional rights. He practiced law in Birmingham for 47 years, never got rich, turned down corporate offers, kept representing people who couldn't afford anyone else, kept fighting the same fights his father had fought, kept believing the law could be a tool for justice. He died of a stroke 3 years ago, federal courthouse in Birmingham, arguing a voting rights case, collapsed at the defense table. Paramedics tried to save him. He died doing exactly what he'd spent his life doing. Imani had eulogized him, standing at the same church where Dr. King had preached, told stories about a man who believed black people deserved every protection the Constitution promised, who spent his life proving it in courtrooms across Alabama. Her mother, Lorraine Caldwell, had been a teacher, taught in Birmingham public schools for 39 years, integrated schools in the 1970s, endured death threats, kept showing up, kept teaching, kept believing education was the path forward. She kept every newspaper clipping from Imani's career, her appointment announcement, her first major ruling, the article about the ICE incident, all of them in a scrapbook on the coffee table. The book sat next to her father's bar admission certificate from 1968, next to a photograph of him marching with Dr. King, next to Imani's Yale Law diploma. 3 generations, 3 different fights, same commitment to justice. The fund has provided representation to 847 families in 5 years. Voting rights cases, housing discrimination suits, police misconduct claims, employment discrimination, educational access litigation, all free, all focused on the communities her family had spent generations serving. The fund employs 12 attorneys, 4 paralegals, 2 full-time investigators, an office in Birmingham, an office in Phoenix, a 3rd office opening in Atlanta next year, mobile clinics that travel to underserved communities every week. The cases vary. A family facing housing discrimination in a predominantly white neighborhood, voters purged from rolls without notice, police misconduct cases where body cam footage disappeared, workers fired for organizing. Last year, the fund won a $3.7 million settlement against a police department that had systematically targeted black drivers. The year before, they stopped voter suppression in 3 counties, kept polling places open, gave people the access to democracy everyone deserves. The attorneys who work there could make more in private practice. They stay because they understand the mission, because representation matters, because the law should protect everyone, not just those who can afford it. People who understand that legal authority should protect rights, not violate them. People who know that civil rights weren't given freely. They were fought for, won in courtrooms, defended by attorneys like Augustus Caldwell Jr. People who believe the fight continues. Marcus Duval served 3 years of his 4-year sentence, released to a halfway house in Texas, barred from federal employment. His name appears in training materials as an example of how bias overrides training. Benjamin Reeves completed his 14 months. He testified at 2 subsequent trials involving ICE misconduct. His cooperation continued. His career didn't. He works private security now. Tells the story sometimes of the day he helped his partner try to detain a federal judge. Gregory Stokes served 22 months. He lost his federal pension, his supervisory credentials, his reputation. He manages a private investigation firm now, mostly insurance fraud. Nothing federal, Chief Judge Sylvia Hartman served 3 more years before retiring. She issued 17 standing orders during her tenure. The ICE coordination protocol became her most cited. Other courthouses adopted it, other chief judges referenced it. Some protocols get written after incidents prove they're necessary. Judge Imani Caldwell still sits on the federal bench. Same courthouse, same chambers on the 9th floor. Same daily routine of presiding over criminal trials, sentencing defendants, and ruling on the constitutional questions that define federal authority. She's been stopped by security 3 times since the incident. Each time, the guard was new. Each time, they apologized immediately when she showed credentials. Each time, she reminded them that security protocols exist for everyone, that judges aren't above showing ID. The lobby where the confrontation occurred looks the same. Marble floors, high ceilings, the seal of the United States District Court on the wall. Nothing to indicate what happened there. But the security cameras still record. The protocols still govern. And somewhere in Department of Justice databases, the case file remains active as a training reference. Case number 2023C R07742. Subject: unlawful detention of federal judicial officer. Location: Sandra Day O'Connor, United States Courthouse, Phoenix, Arizona. Outcome: conviction, settlement, reform. Lesson: some judges you don't detain in their own courthouse. Judge Imani Caldwell proved that lesson by standing in an elevator lobby while 2 federal agents demonstrated that badges don't justify bias, by being exactly who she said she was, by documenting everything, by refusing to let assumption override jurisdiction, by winning.